All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us in this fourth quarter NHTSA webinar. This is part of our cooperative agreement with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. I am Nick Brule, a senior project manager here at the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. And part of our duties here with the cooperative agreement is to gather data for NHTSA and to also share that data on fatal police crashes, as well as officer safety and wellness initiatives with the larger law enforcement community across the United States. I have with me today Reo Nelson. Reo is a highway safety specialist in the NHTSA Enforcement and Justice Services Division. NHTSA's one of NHTSA's divisions there, and Reo is going to take us through a few things new to NHTSA, and also make sure we're aware of some resources that are out there. Reo, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you, sir, and thank you and the folks at the National Law Enforcement Memorial Fund for all the hard work and tireless work that you guys do. And so we really do appreciate the work that you do. It's tireless as it is. We really do appreciate the relationship that we do have. And so I'm very thankful on behalf of NHTSA and DOT. Once again, my name is Reo Nelson. I am with NHTSA. I'm a highway safety specialist in the program office and with the Enforcement and Justice Services Division. NHTSA projects that an estimated 42,915 people have died in motor vehicle crashes during 2021. And that's about a 10% increase from the 38,824 fatalities in 2022. The projection is the highest number of fatalities since 2005 and the largest annual percentage in the FAR's system history. Behind these numbers is lives tragically lost and family left behind. NHTSA projects the fatalities have now declined slightly in the third quarter of 2022, making it the second straight quarterly decline in fatalities after 7 consecutive quarters of year-to-year fatalities. This increase began in the third year of 2020. With the release of these estimates, acting administrator Ann Carlson said that the fatalities have not increased for 2 quarters, and we still have more work to do to save lives and address the crisis on our nation's highways. That means investing in safety, implementing strategies that work, and embracing a safe system approach outlined in the Department of Transportation National Roadway Safety Strategy. The NRSS leverages the safe system approach and recognizes that law enforcement has a role in supporting each of these principal elements in the strategy, also recognizing that the work of law enforcement officers is critical to the prevention and the reduction of traffic-related fatalities and injuries. And that traffic enforcement must have equity, be consistent, fair, and just impartial treatment for all people. And I'm going to give an update on the LEL program, which is pertinent to our meeting here. A cooperative agreement was awarded to the Johns Hopkins University in September 22. And as part of that agreement, Johns Hopkins has taken over the LEL program. Johns Hopkins is currently developing the LEL Academy to improve the existing training, and training will be offered in person and in virtual academy to replace or augment existing law enforcement training materials. The academy will be up to 5 days long, and the curriculum is currently in development. Johns Hopkins will be evaluating and assessing current programs with the focus on expanding and implementing them. For that point of contact, Charles Files will be the point of contact for that effort. He can be reached at charles.files@dot.gov. And keeping with the updated format, law enforcement materials are currently being updated. There will soon be an update on the SFST, ARIDE, and DRE curricula in the near future. There will be iterations to replace. There will be iterations to replace the 2018 versions, and there's an ARIDE refresher course that is now only available to those who have ARIDE in the past, so just need a refresher. The Expert Insights, the DRE testimony course is now available. The course is for current DREs, and an ARIDE refresher can be found on roadside impaired driving enforcement in the COPS training portal. And Christine Frank, who's also my coworker, is the POC for that effort. She can be reached at christine.frank@dot.gov. And also, I would like to bring up Below 100. Below 100 courses are available. For those who are not aware, Below 100 is an officer safety and survival course using the initiative to reduce police line of duty deaths for fewer than 100 a year. Courses are free and available to state and local enforcement entities. They can be reached at atlas.org or below100.org. And also, I would like to plug our traffic safety marketing website. Please, it's free. If you need any materials, we offer materials on numerous traffic safety campaigns, including drunk driving, car seats, safety, vehicle safety, distracted driving, and motorcycles. Please visit trafficsafetymarketing.gov for all your traffic safety initiatives. It is free to download. Thank you, and I'll hand it back over to Nick.
Okay, thanks very much, Reo, and thanks for all that information. And one of the other things that's great for those resources that you can get at NHTSA are posters to download. So if you have any initiatives, if you're doing something for slow down, move over, or as Reo mentioned, if you're doing something that has to do with impaired driving enforcement or click it or ticket or any of those things, there are advertising materials that you can download and print out. So I want to do three things. As always, I always tell you what we're going to cover in my presentation. And my presentation is centered around the data. And we're looking at 2022, the year-end data. That's why this fourth quarter is the fourth quarter of 2022. I'm going to tell you quickly, I think we have some new people who are joining this webinar who may not be familiar with the Memorial Fund. So first thing I'm going to do is just quickly tell you about the Memorial Fund and what we do here. Then I'm going to take you through the data of 2022 with some comparison to 2021. We'll talk briefly about where we are in our current year. And then I want to clue you in on some events, and Reo already mentioned some resources. I'm going to talk about a few resources for you as well. So if you'll bear with me for 1 second, I'm going to share my screen and we'll start my presentation. Court's indulgence for 1 second here. Here we go. So hopefully you can all see that. As I said, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Memorial Fund. This is the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. We also have the National Law Enforcement Museum, which is part of the same group. Here at the Memorial Fund, we have three pillars that we operate off of. One is the memorial. That is our duty to honor those who have died in the line of duty, and we place their names on the National Memorial Wall. There are currently 23,229 names on that wall, with more names being added each year. We're going to talk specifically just about the traffic safety line of duty deaths, the traffic related line of duty deaths. But of course, you know, we do firearms deaths, heart attacks, deaths from the results of 9/11, and things of that nature. So there's a lot of different categories we cover. We have the museum, and then we also have the officer safety and wellness. Those are the three main pillars of this organization. As I mentioned, the memorial, as we wrap up 2022 and are in the very early beginnings of 2023, we still have to go through cases. December of 2022 saw cases come in, and it takes those organizations some time to get all the data that we require to then match that case to our criteria, and then have the names committee vote on it to ensure that it meets our criteria. This is an image of the men who come out every year and engrave the names on the wall. That'll begin this April for 2023. The museum, and I'm in the museum as we speak. You see this kind of cool photo behind me of these two NYPD cars from the 30s. I'm sitting in the DuPont Gallery, which is not in the image you're seeing now. The DuPont Gallery currently has a display of older police vehicle photos. So it's a big series around the room of older black and white photos of police vehicles. The museum is open. Certainly visit our website for times and tickets. If you're in law enforcement, you do get a discount. And I believe on Saturdays, it's free for law enforcement. And then the last pillar, which is the pillar I work in, officer safety and wellness. And that is not just our cooperative agreement with NHTSA. Some of you may be aware, we put on a traffic safety summit in July. And this is a photo of my boss, Troy Anderson, as we began that traffic safety summit here in the theater at the museum. We have a program called Safe Leo that we work with, which Safe Leo stands for Suicide Awareness for Law Enforcement Officers. And if you're local to DC, we're putting on a training on March 7th on suicide awareness for line officers. We have also the Destination Zero program. I may have mentioned that before. And DZ is a series of officer safety and wellness initiatives where we ask agencies around the country to present their best ideas for how they're making their officers safer, either tactically or through wellness initiatives or through any kind of the things that would support safety in law enforcement, for more vests, better driving training, etc. So let's get into the numbers, and this is where we are now. And I have to caution everybody, as I said, the numbers are still preliminary at this stage for even traffic related, as the numbers may go up. Right now, there are 52 confirmed cases of line of duty traffic related deaths. You see the numbers are down in 2022 from the 586 in 2021. That is due largely to COVID. COVID added an additional over 300 cases for 2021. So we sort of had that big year there with a lot of COVID-related deaths. And you see firearms pretty much stayed steady, but that is an increase. Firearms deaths are ticking up. So that is something else we're watching here at the Memorial Fund. I have good news, and the good news is we don't have any current year line of duty deaths related to traffic related fatalities. That's really good news. And that's good news because at this time last year, we had 11. And right now we're sitting at 0. There are cases I am monitoring. There have been a couple of crashes. One officer in New York, upstate New York, was struck the other day deploying tire deflation devices. And that's something we're going to talk about. So for our 2020 approved traffic cases, as I'm going to break them all out for you, 26 were automobile collisions. And then within the auto collision category, you also have the single vehicle crashes. There were 4 single vehicle crashes. That's relatively low for our general on average numbers for single vehicle crashes. 4 is not bad. Total of 30 crashes. We had 16 struck by crashes, and then we had 6 motorcycle crashes, which you'll see doubled from 2021. So some of the basic facts and details of the 2022 line of duty death cases. I break it down by agency so you can see there municipal agencies, and that's not just cities, that's some organizations like where I live here in Maryland. We have Montgomery County Police. They are essentially a municipal agency. They have a sheriff's office there in Montgomery County, but it's not just city agencies. Municipal can be township, town agencies, as well as city agencies. So the average years of service was 12. The average age was 40. And then there were 47 men and 5 women who died in the line of duty and traffic related cases. Automobile crashes, as I said, there were 26 collisions. And what I do when I do the data analysis, we want to know, well, what happened in those crashes? What were they doing? And the most common was responding to a call for service. And in other portions, I can break it out between responding and expediting. And there is a number within that subset of those who are expediting to calls for service. As we talk about single vehicle crashes, all of them involve someone responding to a call, and 3 of them, they were expediting. So again, I just simply listed for you the most common circumstance in which vehicle collisions occurred. Here's the one statistic that we harp on, and it hasn't changed. I ran the numbers the other day, that 47% of unrestrained operators who are involved in fatal crashes is exactly the same it was in that big chunk of data that I covered from 2015 to 2021, which we covered in the Safety Summit, and I covered again when we looked at seatbelt use in one of our earlier webinars. So that hasn't changed. And if you ask me, that's one of the main things that has to change, right? We've got to get cops to wear their seatbelt no matter what they're doing. If they're driving, they need to have their seatbelt on. So the other category is struck by crashes. There's 16 struck by crashes. So what were they doing when they were struck? Well, 5 were directing or diverting traffic. 3 were on traffic stops. And in 2 of those cases, the officers who were struck had impaired drivers stopped when they were struck by an impaired driver. So impairment is still a huge issue, and I'll have some more statistics on that. if you're familiar, there are a couple of really tragic cases that happened in 2022. They were all struck-bys, and they are all tragedies, but these were particularly tragic. You had a trooper from one state responding, expediting to back up another trooper who happened to be his brother. And he ended up striking the cruiser that his brother was out on a stop with, and drove the cruiser into his brother as well as the individual that they had stopped. And it's very sad, and I can't imagine it. And it's just one of those tragic circumstances that I think, hopefully we can put to good use. And as Reo mentioned, below 100, remembering what's important now and watching your speed, I think those are critical pieces that can hopefully avoid some of these tragedies. The other one is this 2 down here where they're removing a pedestrian on an elevated highway. That was in Pennsylvania. 2 Pennsylvania state troopers, along with the individual that they had gone to get off of, I believe, the elevated portion of I-95 that runs through Philadelphia, was struck by a woman. All 3 were killed by this woman who was, I think, on TikTok stating what a great drunk driver she was. I mean, these kinds of abominations, and it reminds me of some of the cases we see. There was one, I think, out in Oklahoma with a trooper who was struck by a man who was updating his Facebook page, and he crashed into these 2 troopers who were on the scene of a crash with a overturned semi. And, so the distraction and the impairment are huge, huge problems still. Tire deflation devices. I mentioned that I'm tracking a case from upstate New York right now where an officer was attempting to deploy a tire deflation device. It's something that we're looking at and have been, I was just at the National Sheriff's Association just last week here in DC. They had their winter meetings, and this was a topic of discussion with regard to training and really managing the use of these devices. So as far as struck-bys go, one thing that everybody needs to know, here's a resource. It's the respondersafety.com. If you go to respondersafety.com, at the top of the navigation bar, there is a titled tab for struck-by and near miss. If you click on that, it'll take you to the new, well, it's almost a year old now, but a national struck-by reporting system. Those of you who are LELs should certainly be sharing that with everyone that you work with to ensure that even the near misses, the property damage crashes and the injury crashes are being reported in this portal. We can't make changes without data, and this is the way we get it. So as soon as we can get all the DOTs, police, fire, EMS, and towing and recovery on that page to start inputting that data on that website, we can start to get a real picture of what's going on the highway. So I mentioned the last category of crashes is motorcycle crashes, and they did go up. 3 of those motorcycle mounted officers were on patrol. There's an asterisk next to 1 because we put the ATVs in this category. And there was a federal agent working border protection who was on an ATV and crashed while on patrol. The other was responding to a call, and one was had a take-home motor, was returning home. Those generally qualify as coming and going cases, as we refer to them. And then the last officer was escorting. Sadly, that was during the holidays, escorting a series of wreaths across America for the holidays. So when looking at 2022 and 2021, we have some pretty significant reductions, which again, I said there's some good news. Struck by crashes in the red are 2021. And if you remember from the Traffic Safety Summit or any of our previous webinars from 2022, we were really focusing on this problem because 28 was 100% increase from where we were in 2020. And so now you see back in 2022, we've reduced it significantly. And again, I understand how data trends go and how 1 year something can be up for an inexplicable reason and then go back down, but we still have to focus on that and try to improve and react to what we're seeing. Automobile crashes were up by 2, and then you saw motorcycle crashes On average, you get about three to four motorcycle crashes a year. I did recently read about I believe it was in the state of Michigan, there's a law enforcement agency there that is disbanding its motorcycle unit. So I'm not sure what drove that, if it was safety or cost or what that driver was, but I thought that was an interesting decision. So some quick facts on the 2022 crashes. Texas is a very large state. We know that. They had the majority, the highest number of law enforcement fatalities. The state had 12. In that, NHTSA has the country broken into regions, and I'll bring up the map in a minute. Region 6, which also has Texas in it, had 16, and Region 4, which is Florida, Alabama, South Carolina, Georgia, they had 14. And looking at the crashes, not the type of crash, but some of the circumstances in the crashes, 6 of them were head-on collision. And I listed that only because that was unusual. That was a very high number of head-on collisions. Within that number, I know 3 were impaired. And then a couple of them involved wrong-way drivers, one in which the officer was struck trying to stop that one wrong-way driver on a highway. 4 of the struck-bys occurred at construction zones, and this is something we all have to be careful with because 2 vehicles were struck and rear-ended fatally as they were diverting traffic around a construction zone. And in that number 4 there, one of the individuals was unfortunately run over by a piece of equipment on that construction site. It still counts as a struck-by. And that individual who was driving, I think it was a backhoe, actually fled the scene and had to be captured later. I already mentioned the traffic tire deflation devices. We always look at what, beyond just the circumstances of the crash, what were the conditions like? 28 of the 52 incidents, they occurred in darkness. I don't think there's anything really significant there. The one thing I would say is that there were only 2 incidents or crashes that listed weather as a factor. Snow in one and rain in the other. All of the others occurred in clear, dry conditions. 16 of the total 52 cases confirmed impairment. They were impaired. 4 confirmed distraction. And then as always, we look at, are these cases a result of failing to slow down and move over? We've determined that 10 of the 52 involved a violation of the slow down, move over law for that state. So I mentioned the NHTSA regions and down there in Texas and by Florida, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, that's Region 4. Region 6 is New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Mississippi. They're all kind of in that Sun Belt region, and those are the 2 highest regions for line of duty traffic related deaths in 2022. So recommendations, we can make a lot of recommendations. We had the safety summit. The traffic safety summit came up with a number of recommendations. I pulled a few out here that I thought were particularly important. I've already mentioned seatbelts. Below 100, Reo mentioned below 100, but within below 100 are lots of great safety recommendations and practices to save lives. And the majority of below 100 is really towards saving you and getting you to avoid a crash. And one of the things that they talk about is also wearing your vest. So I do look at vests and whether or not a vest was being worn by someone involved in a crash or struck by. And if you recall the video we did 2 years ago with the officer from Ohio, he said that he felt the vest helped protect him even further when he was struck from behind by a car. Monitoring speed, you've heard this before, and now there's all kinds of different ways to do it, from telematics to connecting into the in-car camera to send an alert. Fatigue, Gordon Graham in our Traffic Safety Summit said, that's the dirty little secret in law enforcement. Everybody's tired. Everybody's working long shifts. Everybody's getting called into court. Everybody's having to work longer shifts with no days off. Cops are tired, and there's no way fatigue is not playing into these crashes. Supervision, that's my big thing. If you're a supervisor, you can't go around telling your guys to wear a seatbelt if you don't wear it. And you've got to be the guy to tell them to put their seatbelt on and to slow down. And when you see bad habits, bad behavior, bad practices, address it. Make sure you talk to it. And then of course, right side approaches. I know some folks are like, yeah, we've been preaching that forever. Why do you keep talking about it? Well, it's still happening. We still see cops making left side approaches. Sometimes you might have to, but the majority of the time, even if you're standing on the curb, you can make a right side approach. So I also mentioned events. Lifesavers is coming up. We, meaning the Memorial Fund, will be there. We'll have a booth. And I'll be presenting on law enforcement, officer safety and wellness issues as they relate to traffic on that Sunday, April 2nd. And there is another traffic safety summit coming, sort of on the heels of the one we did in July of 2022. This is going to be over the course of 3 days in Linthicum, Maryland, which is outside of Baltimore. It's being sponsored by the Eastern Transportation Coalition and involves not only the Memorial Fund and NHTSA, but the CDC NIOSH, as well as it involves a number of other players who are going to present on traffic safety and slow down, move over issues. But it's not just law enforcement now. It's fire, it's EMS, it's construction, and it's towing and recovery. And we can't forget about our towing and recovery people. And then, of course, Police Week. You know, Police Week is our big ball. And May 13th will be the Candlelight Vigil, which is held on the National Mall. There'll be a large crowd there this year, as always, unfortunately. And then May 15th is also the U.S. Capitol Service, which is the FOP National Service, which is also honoring law enforcement line of duty deaths. And within that week of Police Week, there'll be a lot more events. So I'm just kind of giving you the highlights. If you have any questions, please send them in. I think a couple have come in. If you have a couple more to send in, send them in, and I'll do my best to clarify or to answer them. And in the meantime, this is Reo's email, pretty easy, reo.nelson@dot.gov, and my email. And just recall, if you're looking at my name, it's EUL, not UEL. So a lot of people do that. A question, let me stop sharing here really quick and I'll answer this question. So a question came in, responding versus expediting. Yeah, this is a good question. I might not have made it clear. Can you share your meaning of the two? Does expediting mean responder at a greater speed, i.e., yeah, running code? Yeah, so exactly. I'm able to, when we're doing these investigations into each crash, looking at the reports to determine whether or not they were running lights and sirens, which is essentially expediting, versus getting what in my agency would have been called code 2, meaning you get there, you go directly, you don't speed, you don't violate the traffic laws, versus expediting, which would be running lights and sirens, or as the person said, running code. So, and as you know, as you travel across the country, people refer to it differently. It's like code 3 is lights and siren. My organization is called code 1. So, but running code is essentially what I mean by expediting. Yeah, so I think I answered that. Yeah, pretty much what that is. There was another question that came in. Is there an average number per year of struck by crashes? Yeah, so as we look at struck by crashes, without having the data in front of me, I would certainly say that in the order of 12 to 14 would sort of be the average. And that's why 2021 was such an outlier. And still this past year, we had 16, which is higher than average. But certainly 2021 was an outlier. And I think that's it. Is that it for questions, Hannah? Yeah, I think that's it. You guys, if you have any other questions, please email me. And as always, I have those flash drives, which we send out. They only go up to 2021 now as we finalize our 2022 data. But we can send you one of those flash drives, which my assistant is handing me right now. And they look like this. They come in the shape of a key. It's got our data, our logo on it. And there's a whole bunch of data on this that you can use at roll calls, for trainings, for your own education. And there are also videos on here. I think 4 of the 5 videos we've produced, which are officers telling their story about how they survived a crash and what they would do differently. And I'm a firm believer that cops want to hear from other cops about a lot of this. So those videos are on there as well. Just send me an email and we can ship a couple of those out to you. And if any of you are going to be at Lifesavers, come by the booth and I'll have some there. And then as we move later through the year, I will update that flash drive with the new video we did in Florida, and we just keep adding to those. So there's more and more data. Reo, I want to thank you for joining us today. I think that's it. And I want to thank everybody for joining us.
Thank you.